what the objective is on this class, we're going to show you a few steps that are involved in, or some of the preparatory steps about how to create an ornament like this. I mean, a bunch of you have seen these things. Rather than try to dismount it, I'll just turn them a little bit. But what they are is they're plaques that have a profile or an image inside there. There's a couple over here that have silhouettes of a person. But what I'm going to do today is show you a little bit about how to go about creating those silhouettes, and some of the reasons for doing that. This body of this ornament starts out with a core like this, and I'm told that it's pretty important that this thing has to start out just absolutely square. So using Woodworkers 4 square techniques, what you want to do is you want to create a core that is 1 3/4 by 1 3/4 by 3.5. I think it's 3 1/4. 3 1/4. Okay. Well, the length isn't critical, anywhere near as critical as the sides. And you'll notice on here there's a great amount of attention paid to where the center of this object is, and that's what a lot of the focus of this class is going to be, is how to use all of these objects here and maintain centers on all of these things so that you get a successful ornament when you get done. Okay, the next step in that process, and the reason for all those marks on there, is you then take and drill out the center in preparation to further hollow out the inside. This is primarily done for weight purposes, so that you reduce the weight of the ornament, so that you don't wind up, bending the Christmas tree when you go to assemble it. Okay, then the next phase that I'll cover is how to take these plaques that are created and affix those to that core that's been prepped, like what I showed you there. So then that brings us to the real emphasis of the class as to how you create these plaques. Those need to be slightly smaller than the size of this core, so that you can assemble them properly, again maintaining center, and not have any overlapping wood and so forth. The tendency is to try to make this the same size as the core, but when you do that, you haven't got a whole lot of wiggle room left, so you're best off creating a little room to work with on the edges of this. Some of the things that you can typically do, you can see this is a nativity scene here that you can put on all 4 sides. George made some Georgia Tech logos for Jimmy Rocker to be able to make a Christmas ornament, Georgia Tech Christmas ornament. Then some of the other items I'll leave up here for display. This is one that was created for University of Florida logo with their gator. But anyway, what is done is you wind up creating this silhouette. You create a pattern for it. You apply it to the block of wood. You do an entry hole. You stack cut it, so you create through the entry hole you wind up cutting out the positive and the negative piece at the same time. Save all the parts and then reinsert them and glue them. Apply them to the core and mount it on the lathe and turn it. Usually what I like to do, this is the DeltaCAD application, It's a 2D drafting program. I'll show you a little bit about the credits on this. It's a product put out by DeltaCAD.com, which is known under the name of Midnight Software, as opposed to Midnight Auto Parts. Come from some of our misspent youth. When I start off making these plaques, the first thing that you got to do is define the size of the plaque. The way I like to do that is I want to put the plaque dead square in the center of the screen here. So what I do is I start off by defining a point that will not show up. Then I edit that point and make sure that it is dead center in the center of the workspace here. So I define that as 0, 0, and now my point here will wind up in the center of the screen. You'll see a reason for that shortly. Right, defined on top of that, what I'm now going to do is draw this plaque at being 1 5/8, which is an 1/8 of an inch smaller than the core. Okay, what I'm next going to do is draw a line on here.
1 5/8.
Yep. I was just trying to think of how best to depict that. So I'm going to do an offset off of this center part here. So that'd be 1 1/4. And to avoid making a bad math mistake here, I'm going to divide that here. So my offset is 8 1/4. I'm going to define another point here as 0.825.
125. 0.125.
Yeah. And you'll notice down here in the corner, in this region, is where the dimension is showing up. So we got another point that is showed up there. Now we'll begin drawing off of that reference line or reference point. Come across here by 1.625. That's the 1 5/8 dimension. We will offset that, draw a parallel line down here at 3 1/2. And then basically connect the two. So this winds up being the block that we're interested in. Now what I'm going to do is draw in where the center line is going to be. And with that, I'll make that one red and make it a dashed line so you're not tempted to cut any of it. So now then that becomes your pattern now for making your core for that one side. We will then use this as a method to place the plaque that we're going to create. So we will we'll save this one aside for use later. Let me start by showing you yet another way to draw a square. This is probably the way I should have depicted it to begin with. We'll draw a shape here. We'll just do a simple square. Define that thing as 1 3/4 by 3 1/2. So this winds up being our center block that will become useful in a moment. So we'll just do the quick thing and call this core and save it right where it is. Okay, similarly we want to do another one, this being the plaque, the bare plaque. Okay, we'll do this one at 1 5/8 by 2.5. Okay, there we have the core. We're going to spend a fair amount of time on this one. Let me get that so that I can see all the edges on this. Okay, there we go. Again, I'm going to draw a center line on here.
Bob, does it automatically find those points?
Yes.
Okay.
It tries to snap to the end of a line or an intersection, and I flinched there just before I got to the end of that, so let me redo it. So there's the center line of our bare block before there's an object in the center of it. Okay, so now comes the point where you're going to put whatever your object of interest is in the center, like a silhouette or a logo or something like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go get one out of my library here. So here I'm going to import this from deep down in where I got all these things stored. Okay, now then, what I've chosen to do for a silhouette on this, and this is where we need to spend a few minutes. What we're going to do here is lay in a copy of a picture. The reason I wanted to use it as an example is this is a good example of how to do a profile shot, suitable for putting on one of these ornaments. If you're going to go through the work to do one of these things, you'd like it to be a legacy piece when you get done. But you'll notice that there's a, decorative looking background back there. It's plain blue. You don't want a lot of figuring back there if you can avoid it. No other pictures or wall decorations in the background.
No shadow.
Ideally you want to try to avoid any shadows. Taking it out in the sunlight would probably not be a good idea because you're certainly going to get a shadow there. Try to get completely perpendicular to the person that you're going to take the picture of. So you don't want to be significantly offset, like 15 degrees or something like that, because that's going to give you a rough time. You don't want to take a head-on shot either, like from the front, because by the time you cut out a silhouette there, it's going to look like a pumpkin with ears. Because you aren't going to have the detail of the eyes, nose, or face, or lips, or anything like that. You're going to show up in a silhouette. So this one here will create a nice silhouette. That's why I used it as an example. The next part of the process here, George, do you want to do the honors on drawing the profile of this? Okay, I know one of the things that George is going to explain to you is because of the fact that we're going to draw a profile on top of a picture, we need to create a layer. So I'll get George to explain the layering concept and why.
Now what you do, you have your picture, and now I have a tracing sheet that I'm going to place over the front of that picture. So I make that current, I place it on the front, and I'll close it. Now I've got that blank sheet over the top. So then I go to spline, and this wiggle line over here, so I can go in any direction I want to. And choose, he's got red on here, so I'll use red. And I always use a thin line. So you start tracing this. I'll start here, and this thing is really sensitive. I'm having trouble controlling it. You can end that any way you want to. You can end it 3 or 4 times before you get, but you always have to hit at least 2 clicks and a 3rd click to close it.
And George, what does that do to that line then? Because you're doing 3 points, it kind of makes it.
Yeah, well, when you hit a line like that, if you're going to curve it, you can click it there and watch that line form. So you can move it around like this. I'll pick up here and go. I won't pick up there.
George, you're making a certain number of clicks all along as you do that?
I'm just clicking every place I want it to curve. And I'll click there and I'll click here, then I'll go across the top and you click again, and then when I come down here, it'll follow that line.
The less clicks you do, the more the program does the curving for you and makes it less jagged, right?
If you want to go around a curve, let me end this one to show you. If you want to make a half round, you click here, and then back down here, and see how it'll slope around. So the longer you can go between clicks, the better off you are.
Should have made that line darker like we did one time.
Anytime you want, you don't want it to curve, you want a sharp point, you double click.
You know, you'll notice an area that George was approaching there where he's got the sharp bend underneath the jaw as it approaches the neck. You may want to get better definition on that, so you'd use more mouse clicks there to define it.
Now to look at my tracing, I go to View, Layer, Tracing. Of course, I've already made it current. All I have to do now is turn the original off. Close, and there's the profile. The main place you want to pay particular attention is on the front like this, because you can see the difference in them. When I get ready to make the box like he was showing earlier, I go to Line, and then you click here and go out to the right when you got, let me get it off of that. Get it on solid line. When I want to make a 1 3/4 inch line, I start like that and hit 1.75, and it'll automatically make it 1 3/4 inches. Then hit the down line. Click on that once you start it, then hit 3.25, gives you 3 1/4. Now you can either can either click this and move that line down, but I find it just as easy to click on that again. And hit 3.25 again, and then all you have to do is join those two. And that gives you your box. And then when, as he was showing you to find the center, I'm going to turn the picture off, so all I have is the tracing. Now I want to put that picture in there, but of course I want it much smaller. So what I do is measure this, and from top to bottom, well, the most important measurement on this is the width. You can go almost anything you want to on the top, because as he cuts these, he can cut them a little longer if he needs to, but he can only go so wide. So I'll measure the width, and from the farthest point out this way, I would say it's right there to about, maybe this. It's 2.54, and I want that 1 3/4. No, I want that 1 inch. So I go to my calculator and take the 1 inch and divide it by 2.54. Okay, so now what I do is take that figure to 0.4, get that out of the way.
You know, that now becomes your scaling factor that you're going to reduce that silhouette by.
Take that off. Now I'll select the picture. And go to SC, hit 0.4. Now it's made that picture 1 inch wide. Now I'll take that picture and select it. You'll notice when I select it, I'll
Put a box
to
around it.
move it.
Ah.
You got a box with an X in it, so all you have to do is match that X up with that one. If I can slow down enough. Well, that's approximate. But once you get to that point, then go back and erase these two lines. Now that's right in the middle of that. And that's how I make these panels like this. Of course, I'll go in here in an inconspicuous place, probably right there, where that arrow is, and drill a hole. I stack cut them. I take a light one and a dark one together, and stack cut them. Put a hole there, and using a very fine blade, go around and cut the whole thing out. And you cut it straight. You don't cut these at an angle, because you've got to take the center out of one and put it into the other.
From a standpoint of placement of that hole, George, where do you normally try to place it? Down in the shoulder area down there?
Well, I can place it right under. I can place it right there is a good spot, right in it.
This is kind of what started the whole process.
Well, he had just a standard 5-star. This is a Star of Bethlehem, I call it, because it's got the long stroke on the bottom. But it's pretty hard to turn those corners and get really sharp corners. As everybody's always said, the hardest thing to cut with a scroll saw is a straight line. And of course, that's all straight line and little tiny corners that you've got to go around too, so it's a little difficult to cut. Here's one you asking about the inlays. This is one of the hardest ones I do. You got that? You see there, I don't have just a silhouette, because a silhouette of that just doesn't look good. We have 7 pieces. We actually have to transfer on each one of these. And I use enough glue in it. I'm always afraid they're going to start turning it, and some of these parts are going to come loose and jump out. So I put enough glue in there that when I get through, it's got glue all over both sides. I have to clean them. Of course, I just take them over to my belt sand and polish them off. And it wouldn't matter if I didn't polish off the one side, the side that goes against the block, because they're going to cut the top off anyway. But I hate giving somebody something that looks so cruddy looking.
George, did you just let the glue fill your curve? Your
Yes.
saw curve?
And then he said, Jimmy, if there's anything left, when Jimmy places them on his block, he puts enough glue on them and the pressure, it fills whatever gaps there's left, right, Jimmy?
Follow up on a comment George just made on the sanding on the side that you want to adhere to the core. That sanding step that George does is very important because the two flat surfaces have to be together. When you turn it, if they're not flat and glued together, you're gonna have voids but on the seam line between the two. So that sanding step that's done is very important for the assembly.
Let me explain a little bit about some of the mechanics that you need to be aware of if you choose to embark on this. What I did is I drew the width of the overall block here, or I'm sorry, of the overall plaque. You know, this part here I'm calling the plaque. I've dimensioned this at 1.63. What you want to make sure that you do when you go to lay one of these profiles on there, you want that sufficiently far inside of your plaque such that when you turn it, you don't wind up turning away the edge of the profile.
1 inch is almost maximum. You can
Yep.
slide it over 1 inch, but not much.
I think I calculated it out by laying in a radius and so forth, and I think I came up with 1 3/16. But that would be, I mean, you're exposing part of the profile when you do that. So George's indication of 1 inch gives you sufficient margin there. The other reason why I draw these X's in there and the layout of the profile is that when you grab this thing and you then put it on your plaque, what you're going to wind up with is you need to make sure that that thing is dead center. Otherwise, when you turn it, you're going to wind up with a different margin in between these two cameos on one side than on another.
When you move it, it'll actually center itself too. When you select the profile and move it over to the block.
Okay, yeah, if they're the same size, it'll try to center itself, yeah. But you want to make sure that the silhouette that you wind up with is centered inside the plaque. That's another important measurement. The last important measurement before we show you a different way to create silhouettes here is the thickness of these blocks. You want to make sure that they're consistent among the 4 blocks. Otherwise, that's going to affect how your cameo is going to turn out. I think Jimmy's recommendation is they be a 1/4 inch thick, so you may want to start out a little bit thicker so that you got room to sand down. But however you do it, you may want to run it through the planer or some other type of surface treatment like that to get them down to the same thickness. And then just for good measure, use a dial caliper or some sort of thing like that to verify the thickness is proper. Okay, right at this point I wanted to bring Steve Carmichael up to show you another slick way in case you've got access to somebody that knows Photoshop real well.
In order to do this in Photoshop, it helps to have a background color, like against a white wall or something like that, where there's not much in the background, so it's all kind of the same colors. But Photoshop has this electric lasso tool right here, but it has a tolerance. You can see a field up here. Right now it's on 32, but depending on that number, when you click in the colored background area, it will look at the pixel that you clicked on, and everywhere else it will try to find other pixels attached to that one that are the same color, and it'll select all those too. So you can see it selected pretty much the top half, I guess, of the background. But you can see like an area over here it did not select. And that's because that tolerance of 32 is saying that those pixels right there are too different a color from the one you clicked on for me to select. So if I change that tolerance,
You change one at a time.
or I could either change the tolerance or I could just press shift and click on the ones it did not select and it'll grab those two. So like down here, it's saying these are darker than the other ones up above, so I can press shift and select those. But you end up with all these little points. The pixels are a little bit different. And they have different lasso tools, selection tools. I'm just gonna select the square one here. But if I press shift again, I'm going to add those to my selection so I can just click and drag and grab all those little bits too. There's this other lasso tool here that you can click on. And you can do kind of what George was doing with drawing the lines around the profile. But if you hold down shift, I can start the little lasso thing and kind of get rid of the shoulder. And I can grab some pixels like that as well. But I need to start up here further. But all I'm doing is adding more to my selection whenever I do that. So at this point, I've got all the stuff around the silhouette selected. So if I just want to select the head, then I would go up to the select menu and choose select inverse, and it's going to select everything else. So now it's really just the head that's selected. So at this point, I'm going to cut the head out of the picture there.
Decapitate.
All right. And then I'm going to hide that layer. Then I'm going to paste the head back on there. All right. Then I'm going to get rid of these little bits that are still hanging around here. So at this point, now that it's just the head in there, I'm going to use the lasso tool and select all around it. And then I'm going to select the inverse, which would be just the head is selected now. And I want to fill that with, I know a lot of you guys like to cut along red lines. So I'm going to fill that with red. All right. And then at this point, it's still selected, so you can go to this little select and modify option and contract. And I'm going to contract it by 4 pixels. Would be good. And click OK, and see how the selection shrunk. So now if I delete all the red out of the middle, I end up with a red line silhouette.
Which may be too thick, so you may have needed to go 1 pixel,
Yeah.
2 pixels.
Yeah, so you can always go back.
You can make a real fine line on that. That's good.
That's another way to do it. And the difference is the DeltaCAD you were using, it's more like vector graphics, where you have points that are connected by lines, whereas this, you're working with pixels. So like if we zoom in here, your line is actually made up of little squares of colors, which is raster.
The main reason I wanted to show you this technique is if you've got a profile or an object that is just way more complex than you feel comfortable attacking with DeltaCAD, keep in mind that it looks like we've got about 4 people here that have Photoshop or something equivalent. Okay, I think that's all I have. Thank you.